I can see you this time. I'm just saying that. So no taking the piss this time.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Revolting podcast. Welcome back to myself and Una. No, I'm not going to introduce Una. That was awful. Stop.
That's a good clip.
Hi everyone, welcome back to episode 2 of the Revolting podcast. I'm John MacAskill.
And I'm Úna Brosnan.
And welcome back. So, about a month or so on from launching episode 1. So before we go into what we're going to be talking about here, maybe what we do is, how was it for you?
Yeah, it was brilliant. It was so nice to get some lovely comments. I mean, it kicked off, I think we were really, really nervous about getting this podcast up and running. I mean, the two of us were pretty in poor shape before we came in, and we were like, poor shape after, to be honest, as well, after 3 hours. But I think, the feedback, and I think, us trying to be a little bit more authentic really helped, and it was nice to just be able to do that from a personal capacity as well, and we had a hell of a lot of fun.
It was. No, it was. Everyone was being really nice. Maybe they're waiting for episode 2 and 3 before they start giving us nasty tweets. But no, it was really good. It was really good to get some feedback. I can't believe how much I lacked confidence in it a little bit in terms of doing it, but I really enjoyed it, and the teams here is awesome. So I think that the support that
John,
we've had
I think
is
you aced
brilliant.
it. Absolutely natural.
It was brilliant.
Yeah,
We both did. So excellent. So really brilliant. So please keep listening. Click subscribe. Click like. We didn't do that the last time, so we thought we better get that. So we're here on episode 2. And we've been sort of planning this. Una and I have been sort of looking for months of what kind of other themed episodes, because we mentioned in episode 1 why we're doing it, and it's not just floating wind and offshore wind. It's because there's lots of topics we're really interested in. We're wanting to meet really interesting and brilliant people to talk about various sort of topics and things. And one area that we've been really interested in is the fossil fuel ladder. And we're going to explain what that is, but it's one of the biases around how oil and fossil fuel forecasts are done, and it's what it is and what actually how it could break. So we're going to then look into EVs and transportation in Africa, because one of the rules that the fossil fuel industry tends to have about its demand forecast is the fossil fuel ladder. So we're going to explore that a little bit in episode 2, and then in episode 3, which is themed, we're going to be going into Latin America.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. I mean, I've been heavily invested in Latin America. I love it. I've backpacked around there long enough, so really excited about that one. I think it brings a nice flair, and it's going to be an interesting, I think, next decade for Latin America. So really looking forward to diving into that one.
So it's going to be really interesting venturing forth into the other sector.
And it's not just renewables. There's a little bit of history there, and there's little funny flavors as well about how the DNA of some of these countries, and it's been really interesting. And even last week, just kind of looking at, say, some of the intricacies when I was doing the research, it was really nice to see kind of the impact some of the European backstories and the links with Scotland and links with Ireland in some cases were having on the DNA in some of these countries, and how they will go forward. So I think it's a quite little dark horse is what I would say, but interesting.
So before we go into that, I've been suffering from, and actually Lara Laurie, my colleague in OWC, it was her that mentioned this, but we've been suffering from FLOMO. So
FLOMO.
Basically we've got a FLOMO Anonymous Society for those of us that did not get to the floating conference.
Oh wow.
So before we delve in, for someone who was looking at it from afar, who didn't manage, how, what was some of the
John,
the takeaways?
It was look, we were personally, I was quite nervous about coming up to flow, purely because the market has had a tough year, whether it's in fixed or floating. But I suppose floating has been really, really taking the brunt of it, particularly because we've got a lot of great challenges around the projects. We've obviously got a lot of DevEx, which is moving about the market, and investor confidence is shaking a little on technology. But actually, we went in, people were really practical about it. They were very much, yes, it's tough, but it was shoulder to the wheel. And I think after a very difficult summer across offshore wind in particular, coming back in and really kind of hitting the ground running in September, they have their heads up. They're fully recognising the challenge ahead. And it was great actually, because what we were aiming for was to bring more engineers into the conversation. And I think at Flow we achieved getting a couple of steps up in that. Yeah, and really trying to get into the nitty-gritty on how we take this forward. I don't think it's a done deal by any form, but there's been a lot of positive steps there. You would have seen actually just a week later, we had an announcement from Great British Energy, which was really positive. They've got an option to enter the Pentland project, which I think, look, this is the first step for floating. They see the opportunity, and I suppose that goes right up to government level. They see the opportunity, but they see the challenge as well. So let's see what we can do with this. I'm sure there's a couple of more announcements to come after that, but nonetheless,
it was good to see that. There was two things that occurred to me. One, it's kind of more. It's not that putting solar panels on schools aren't important, right? But this kind of is the mandate. You know what I mean? Because obviously, floating versus fixed. Floating has, if we do this right, has the ability to produce some, added value for UK companies, etc. Because it's sort of newer, so there's the ability to position ourselves in a localized supply chain.
Yeah. And
of course, the floating technology needs that kind of, the additional value that you come with an investment pound that you get from these bodies like SNIB and Great British Energy. So the first thing was, I thought that's the remit that I expected.
Yeah.
And the other one is that it's just good to see that level of interest in the floating in the floating market generally. So obviously we hope that AR7 pans out.
Yeah, it's.
And, to be able to sort of to be able to sort of proceed with that, but it's really good to see. It's been waiting for a while, but they need to do a whole bunch of things before they start. Those
and
mandates down.
180 million on AR7 is really important. I know it's coming under a bit of scrutiny that we won't get. Probably we would have liked a lot more, but we do have to balance this with what the budget is overall,
and
where
affordability
the cost
as well. So
right now,
clearing everything fixed and floating, would be a very difficult thing for the government to try and manage that value for money element. The industry wants more, of course we do. So we want a larger pot, because we don't want 2 projects. We want 3. We don't want 3. We want 4.
The gauntlet's down. We need to show cost reduction at the This is key. We had it.
I just
exactly
hope that enough that gets that gets awarded has enough within this enough scale to actually generate the value chain and the supply chain to generate the cost. It's one project might not move the dial, but maybe a number of projects would. So it's like, is this, what we get awarded, will that be enough to do that? That's my only question.
I suppose just to go on the positive side, I mean, it was brilliant. I was on the floor for the majority of it, to be honest, but the upside then was the technologies, looking at the buzz around some of the drinks reception. I was pleasantly surprised. I didn't think it would be as buzzy, but it was lovely to see, really leaning into some of the technology. Some of them have taken leaps and bounds. They've got a lot of investment and grant funding behind them, and there is a lot of positives to celebrate on that side. But how we maintain that momentum and really push it through into 26, that's really important. But look, John, you were in Malaysia. How was that? I mean, Asia is
it was warmer than Aberdeen, I can tell you that much for start. Oh, it was a little wetter, but it was warmer, so you didn't need a big jacket.
It was Baltic Thursday afternoon coming out.
It was really good, though. I mean, though I had FOMO, I was checking my LinkedIn, looking at all the photographs and stuff, including the guys here with the coffees and everything. It was
We had a
great
great
because
time.
obviously I was wearing a functional hat, so I was wearing, so obviously I was there with my day job, which
Yeah.
was great because fantastic colleagues, so a bit of a name check, ABL Group, so brilliant functional hat. But but obviously, I'm with colleagues that are involved in the renewable sector out there, and there does seem to be, even though there's been missteps in Japan, Korea isn't as sort of, they've got the localization thing there, and we've seen it. Generally, if you look at all the technologies, it's really quite positive out there. There's a really good buzz. We've got some of the biggest global BES markets in Southeast Asia. Funnily enough, there isn't the same. One of the things I think I mentioned to you in one of the preps for us, there isn't the same. I've got colleagues and there's people in the industry that will work. 2 days they're doing something in oil and gas, and 2 days they're doing something in renewables. There doesn't seem to be this sort of sort of clash, us and them thing, which we are trying to resolve in the UK because we need to. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion around the budget that's coming up, and is that given the timeline away? And the tax issue around oil and gas and stuff, and trying to keep an industry whilst we bridge to the new industry. It's so that they just see it. They don't sort of deny things that they need to change, but they're okay in working at it. So it's great. And I won. I didn't win because obviously my colleagues are going to be watching this, so I can't pretend that my team won the cooking competition. So
it was cooking.
It was cooking, yeah. So basically, we're all in teams.
Yeah.
And we were sort of cooking a starter and a main meal and a sweet. And
John.
I did a lot of peeling. So I brought my peeling sort of capability to.
I think, team, we might need to test this cooking soon.
Well, yeah, peeling. I can do the peeling. I can peel carrots. I did peel carrots. So it was great. It was really excellent. And but came back and so hailstorm. So I was at. So I finished off last week going to see Hailstorm and Bloodywood, which is an Indian heavy metal band which mixes Indian folk, sort of new death metal and rap, which was really good.
Rap.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Absolutely awesome. Recommend Bloodywood. So I was there with Alex Gawn and his partner Kelly from Water to Water. And so I'm going to put my finger up for the production team to put the photograph that I'll send you.
Do you know who else was cooking? Una at the conference absolutely slayed your panel session, and
you what?
You absolutely slayed.
Oh right, okay. I was like, what?
Sorry.
Okay, yeah.
And you both have done fantastically. So to celebrate episode 1, we've got, and in the spirit of Christmas,
Oh.
we've got a couple of gifts for you.
Oh, thanks very much. I'm nervous.
Do we look at them just now?
Yeah.
All right.
All right, okay. You first, Una.
Nervous now. I'm really nervous.
Oh, don't want to knock the mic.
Ooh.
Oh, it's a reciprocal. It's coffee mug shaped.
Oh, no way. I can see it.
Look, I can't see anything
Brilliant.
yet.
God, they were well packed.
Oh my God, that is absolutely
That is
fantastic.
brilliant. Thank you very much.
That is brilliant.
Oh, guys.
All good.
Hang on.
That is brilliant. I love it.
That's
love
brilliant.
It. And there's no way I thought you'd have managed to get that done.
Well, we're going to have to get some coffee into this.
I know. Yeah, we'll have to get coffee into that. That is brilliant. That's superb. Put that. I'm going to put
my
that
water
there.
in
There
there.
we go.
Oh,
That
thanks,
is
guys.
brilliant. Thank you.
Oh.
Una, we've got our own mug.
I know. Jesus.
It's like the One Show.
I don't know if that's where I'm going.
I know. It's not. No, it's okay.
Not looking for a job, lads.
And since I did see the photographs of all the coffee getting launched, which I believe was a massive success at the place, I'm delighted I've got my own bag now.
It's pretty good.
I was going, I've missed my bag.
I knew you would. Hence, we were like, we got to get a photo. We got to get a
Fantastic.
photo.
So that is.
No, thanks, guys. That was
Into the
really
French press
lovely.
tomorrow.
Really, really lovely. And very uncomfortable seat there for 5 minutes.
So I've got to read this.
You've got to read this. So I'm going to give you my phone, and then don't look at it yet, and then you got to hold this.
Hold this at the same time.
And in the spirit of Christmas, because this is your Christmas episode, I thought this would be a nice idea.
Yeah. Okay. Right, everyone. Okay. As winter begins to roar and clean power hums from shore to shore, we wrap the year in stories bright, renewables lighting up the night. Renewables, oh, bugger. No, renewables light, oh. As winter begins to roar and clean energy hums from shore to shore, we wrap the year in stories bright, renewables lighting up the night. Send us your questions, insightful, alive. 5 bags of coffee for the top festive 5.
Woohoo!
Is
that all right?
Yeah.
Straight
Thank you.
into
What were you saying earlier about being in production and loving a theatre moment?
Oh, God,
You
yeah. right, I know.
completely... You're in it, John.
I'm in it, yeah. Okay, so...
Yeah, I mean, look, John, well done. That was pretty awesome. What we're going to do is we're really going to go out for a cough. We'd love some of your questions to come in and give us a little bit of a challenge. You know, what do you like? What don't you like? What would you like to see more of? How do you want to annoy John or want me to annoy John? Let me know.
Best albums of the year. Anything like that. But questions around, questions that might be just interesting for us to ask about the industry, or questions that the industry is asking. Anything from serious to lighthearted, please send them in. And we'll stick them.
Yeah,
into the
absolutely.
future web.
And kind of going back to floating, I actually had some really good questions from the floor. Just people who want to understand the market a little bit more. It's difficult, but if there's anything we can do to support, please let us know, and we'll do our best to explain it in a very open and transparent manner. That this is what it's about. It's not easy, but we understand people are worried right now about the industry. It's not all doom and gloom. It's just getting under the hood. This is natural when you've got a new an emerging technology like the likes of floating. So let's see what we can do to help.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why we started this, is to try and bring some
Sorry,
lightness
the
in
tinsel
the
fell down.
tinsel fell down. Okay,
slipped.
tinsel emergency.
Yeah, we're okay.
We'll batter through it like good troopers on the stage. But yeah, so anything like that would be great to hear about that.
Let's get stuck in.
Sean, and so we mentioned at the start about the fossil fuel ladder.
What exactly do you mean by that?
What do I mean by the fossil fuel ladder?
I'm trying to get my head around what it actually means.
So the fossil fuel ladder is it started in the 50s. It was actually about the home. So it was first about heating about the home. It was basically, biomass and coal, oil, kerosene, gas, then, electrification, and renewables. But it became almost like a market-based thing that as a country goes from less affluent to affluent, they go through this cycle of sort of power.
Yeah.
And in terms of transportation, it's walking, bicycles, motorcycles, ICEs, and then there's EVs. So there's that assumption that you go through these phases. But interestingly, it's quite rigid.
Yeah.
But as we're beginning to see, it's not. It's just not fixed. There's things that are potentially breaking it. So it started off, as I said, in heating, and it's kind of been adopted by international bodies like the International Energy Association, like all the forecasters that you get with the big oil companies, the big international oil companies, and also the national ones, and also things like OPEC Plus.
Yeah.
So it's one of their models that they use for forecasting. But it's also used by sort of global organisations that look at funding. So it finds its way into financing, policy. So it's this sort of they assume it's a rule, and actually it's a bias because it's based on the West, what's happened in the West, which is really interesting. It's we have been through that because the 50s had the technology that the 50s had.
Yeah.
The 60s had, etc. So it's been assumed. So when you look at so one of the assumptions is that Africa, for instance, will use the last 1 billion barrels of oil.
Yeah.
Right. That it's Africa's turn to utilize fossil fuels to generate growth and all that stuff which the West has had. but it assumes that that's the only technology choice, and that's actually not the case.
I suppose the dynamics of how the communities and the countries are set up as well is guiding them heavily. But it's interesting to think, I suppose, are we that close-minded that we don't see something else happening, and that leapfrogging, that way of thinking is just going to be imposed on, say, the global south. It's not really going to be the reality, or it isn't how reality works, really, is it?
No, it isn't, and I think it's a bit of both. I think it's a natural bias that is baked into things. So it's baked into things. It's baked into forecasts in the way that an entire industry, you can't boil an industry down to an individual, right? So, I could sit someone from OPEC Plus and have probably a really good conversation and have and accept both views about certain things. But as soon as you then look at it from an organisational point with organisational bias, that's when things become a little bit more sort of static when it comes to these. And it's like, do you question? I mean, for instance, the BRICS is viewed, the BRIC nations are viewed as a very, very sort of static kind of body that, again, is going to go through as it develops, even though, China's very developed, through this ladder. But actually it splits, the BRICS split between electrostates and petrostates, right?
Yeah.
So they're not the same. So I think it's definitely a bias, and there's probably elements from maybe the fossil fuel industry that will lean into it. It's also kind of assumed in policy documents and policy thoughts and stuff, but it's just not the case. I mean, if you go back to the historical, we mentioned that it goes through these sort of sequences, but what the developing world has shown that actually that kind of thought process, that the technology steps that the West took, that they've got to do the same. So, for instance, Africa didn't lay miles and miles of copper wire. Right, they went straight, into mobile telephony and everything else. They went straight into cashless with technologies, and straight into mobile without even cards and etc. And that's based on technology. Now, when you look at it from a transportation point of view, which is what we'll do, you don't have what we have. We don't have the we don't have the ICEs at the moment. We don't have the infrastructure that the West has. So it's all there in terms of the technology choice, the policy, and the infrastructure that's available to actually show that they might leap the ladder. Or at worst, it'll be a very messy leap. In other words, it's going to be a bit messy, but it will happen. So
quite deep then.
In terms of...
It's like as in how it goes, penetration in, it's quite deep on how that transition might happen.
Absolutely.
And how infiltrated that ladder gets into an economy.
Yeah, so I mean, I work in offshore wind.
Yeah.
Right, so I'm not a transportation expert. I'm certainly not, I would be horrified if someone says that I'm an expert in energy policy in Africa. It's more an area. My interest comes back to fossil fuel, the forecast modelling, because about 6 months ago I started looking at how they build up, what some of the sort of the assumptions is made when these forecasts are built.
Yeah.
And at the moment I was reading that between the EI, the International Energy Association, and OPEC Plus is like a 2 million barrel difference in what they say next year is going to be, which is totally flummoxing for the finance, forecasting industries and stuff, because normally there's meant to not be that much of a disparity. So it's like, how do they do it? So I started looking at some of the assumptions that they actually make, and that led me into things like the fossil fuel ladder, and then it's like a tuning your radar. You then look at, well, actually, does that hold water? And then you start realising that actually it doesn't really hold water, because Africa is meant to be, so just to keep it on Africa, Africa is meant to be the next big sort of oil and gasoline market. As the West goes into, decarbonises its transportation, it's meant to move to Africa. But actually, it might decarbonise as quick as Europe in terms of its transportation.
I mean, it's certainly on a speedboat for rapid development. It's been earmarked for probably the last decade, but it's still, I suppose, trying to get off the start line. But we are seeing, in particular, I suppose, when we were doing the research, you mentioned Nigeria and getting into that. And tell us a little bit more about what came up in that research for yourself.
So it's Nigeria. So Nigeria is quite messy in the moment. So the thing that got me is there was a Bloomberg article showing that for a period of time in Nigeria, ICEs outsold.
I should go pick you up. ICEs for the
we're meant to not be using.
For those who might not know it,
we're not meant to be using.
You're getting a rap across the knuckles for using that acronym.
Okay. Internal combustion engine, gas guzzlers, as we mentioned in episode 1. So EVs for a period outsold internal combustion engine cars in it. And that sort of went, oh, okay, that was really surprising. Now, there's still a lot of friction in that because Nigeria's got the national energy policy, probably got that wrong, but is very ambitious. It wants to totally decarbonise its transportation by 2060.
Yeah.
It wants to start phasing internal combustion engine cars out from 45. But the policies don't really match that. So, for instance, it's got very high tariffs on importing electrical vehicles, EVs. It hasn't got great charging infrastructure. It's one of those things that you know it really well because you work in policy and not in EVs, but you work in policy in offshore wind. It's one of these things where ambition isn't matched by policy at the moment.
Yeah. And attention it's everywhere. You know, it's not just in offshore wind, or it's not like as in Nigeria. You're seeing exactly those type of ambitions. I mean, even looking at, say, some of home Ireland in particular, we're struggling to get. I mean, there's a lot of inroads on EVs, but the policy, similar to what you were saying, you could actually change the narrative, you could leave the narrative and you could just change the country title. We didn't have we're still building up that charging infrastructure. But then you look at the policies. We've got great ambition. You know, is the likes of Nigeria trying to do its best, at the likes of a COP and trying to align with the Paris Agreement and be there at the forefront, just to get ahead. But, then you look at the likes of Norway, which is, a very huge, obviously one of the global leaders in fossil fuels and oil and gas. And they have completely tripped up everything when it comes to policies. They have really embraced the EVs. I think Elon Musk was, depending on where their views are on him right now, was one of the heroes. I saw him speak in Norway a number of years back. I don't think I'll be openly too braggy about that one anymore.
Depends what he's on at the time.
Yeah, I kind of lost the love there. So basically, their infiltration and penetration in EVs is admirable, to be fair. They've really invested in their infrastructure. They've brought up the charging structure. They had a lot of tax incentives. And I suppose it'll be interesting to see and hear how Nigeria is addressing that. But you're saying there's that tension.
Yeah, so they've got really big ambitions, but it isn't matched by their policy yet, and that's not and they've got I'm sure that will then close because you then look at there's Ethiopia, for instance. Ethiopia have banned internal combustion engines, right? And EVs. I mean, okay, there's 1.5 million cars, but they're up to 1,150. Right, or over 100k in terms of EVs. They've just extended that, and I think are starting to ban or will ban heavy goods type stuff. So they've went very aggressive with their policies. Now, but they've got obviously they can really decarbonise because they've got about 97% of their energy is through hydro. Yeah, and they've got the controversial dam that's the Grand Renaissance Dam, but that will double that sort of clean energy that it's converted. So they've really aggressively done their policies, almost like Norway style.
So that ban is right now.
Yes.
Wow, I don't think there's any other country in the world that's done that right now.
No, but that's
interesting.
That's what that. And Nepal is also it's not, but it's another interesting case because basically Nepal also has been increasing the amount of EVs again by matching its policy. Yeah. So I think there's the interesting thing about they've got the ability to break that ladder. Whoops, I've lost my pen. Doesn't matter. I don't need my pen. But it is 110 quid, so I need to get it before I go. This is a thing called, I don't think we've even mentioned it actually, because we're talking about the ladder so much, but actually it's leapfrogging. It's this technology leapfrogging. The examples that we've been talking about, mobile money with the M-Peso power, for instance, off-grid. So in other words, they're not going to make a massive thermal power station and then build hundreds of miles of transmission. It's all off-grid, it's small, it's microgrids, etc. It's technology leapfrogging, and that's what I think we're going to see. And leapfrogging tends to happen when the new technology is you can get it. It's modular. The reason that, for instance, actually electrical vehicles, EVs, aren't going to be the thing that really electrifies transportation in Africa anyway, because it's Europe and the US that is a car society. So what you'll get in these in Nigeria and other places is what I've read as is bottom up, where it's the accessible, it's the two-wheeler, it's the 2- and 3-wheeler, which is for personal transportation and hail riding and courier type work. It's the fleets for economic zones, so it's the fleets that are on certain sort of routes that can return back, and their home base, their depots have the recharging. So it's that kind of, so it's accessible transportation that will actually decarbonise transportation, and actually EVs will be, so the coupes, what we see in Chelsea and Morningside, right? The EVs that we see around there, that's the last thing that will probably happen. That will be the middle class. The EVs will come in and change that. So actually, it's the rules are different because the situation is different.
Yeah.
And it's not captured in any of these forecasts at all.
Yeah. And do you think that's kind of linked to their infrastructure as well? Their grid is quite different. It's
absolutely.
Not as
it's I mean, one of the ways that one of the other things that happens when you get leapfrogging is when the existing infrastructure is weak or doesn't exist, and that's what happened in telephony or banking, right? There isn't a bank in every little sort of in every township or something, you know. So and on our side, and on the power side, that exists as well.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. It's when the technology is of a size that's affordable, right? Hence, someone's not going to spend 30 grand on an SUV, but they will potentially look at a two-wheeler, and if they also do sort of ride hailing and things, so it's part of their income, etc. That is accessible. And the other ingredient is where the infrastructure is just weak, so it can't support the same way that the West did it.
Yeah, absolutely. And business is different as well, and particularly going back to that socioeconomic element, the affordability around an EV. They're not cheap. They're certainly not cheap here in Europe, and how you would impose that on a global south country at the minute would be quite a challenge. Unless you were very
privileged. And that's
privileged.
The third ingredient. Yeah. It's when there's a major economic pain in the status quo.
Yeah.
Right. So that they can't you can't duplicate what we have because the differential in the cost is just too much economic pain.
Yeah.
So all those ingredients are there, which makes it really fascinating as to what we will see. And I just don't think this is baked in. I think this is one example now. But the thing that I'm really interested in over the next 6 months is actually what other assumptions are based into these
How are they going to react? What can we learn from them as well? I think that's actually going to be quite interesting. Looking at the dynamics, how they work, how the people react to some of these policies and regulatory frameworks. Well, is there some lessons learned? We always talk about bringing the lessons learned from Europe.
There is an echo. There is a ripple actually. Now that you've mentioned that, is Mingyang turbines, right? Because one of the things we've not mentioned, one of the ingredients here, or one of the main drivers, is the electricity, which is China. So it's finding it quite expensive, or there's these border tariffs. So basically, getting stuff into Europe and the US is not. They're doing it, but they're finding markets that are more open in Southeast Asia and Africa. So these are very. So you've got, I think, the clean tech industry in China now, which is everything from wind turbines to solar to batteries to EVs, is about 10% of their GDP.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is available to these developing countries. So the other thing is there's a big giant that is kicking out that wants export markets that are, you can, whether they're subsidised or whatever, but basically there's this kit, all this, decarbonised clean energy tech kit that's available to these countries. Now, so in Europe, there might not be many two-wheel sort of, EV bikes coming in, but they've got a massive capacity to make wind turbines, and they're looking at Europe as a potential market.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's one of the areas that we see an echo with this. To me, is the current debate on the Chinese turbines that I still see on LinkedIn in the last couple of weeks is still burning.
Yeah,
hot.
I mean, it's certainly it's a huge topic of debate, and it's kind of the elephant in the room in things like the Floating Wind Conference more recently. But it's a case of how do we embrace that conversation more than anything, and how do we put systems and processes in place to define those boundaries on if it can be had, and have those adult conversations, I think is really important. But I mean, this could be transformative for countries, particularly like the likes of Nigeria. But you're right, John, it's messy. It's really, really messy. But that's kind of, I suppose, the way we like it as well. It's, navigating that policy and regulatory framework, the economic side, looking at, you talked about, some of the older cars there. It's quite interesting on the dynamic where you have, brand new technology, and then you're saying there's an older kind of class of internal combustion engine that's out there. How it's interesting that they haven't brought in the newer type of. Has there been policies and tariffs on the newer cars coming in, or is it affordability as well?
Well, I think it's affordability, and I'm not sure about whether they sort of tax the same way second-hand internal combustion engines.
Yeah.
But the thing is that the automotive industry also has a major interest in assuming the ladder when it comes to Africa, because basically it knows it's moving its platforms to electrical vehicles. It sees Africa as a sort of a late, for late platform design cars. So the last 100, the last 1,000, the last 10,000 of cars. So they'll take all their tooling from Hamburg or Sunderland. They'll move it somewhere else for a market that will continue to buy something that's not sold in Europe anymore. So actually, for the automotive OEMs, Africa was seen as a market to allow that shift, that using of those assets, and of course that might not be the case. But that is another group that has this bias baked in.
It's interesting because I mean we talk about some of the onshore turbines in particular and understanding the technology, and I know we're looking at repowering at the minute, but if you've got a potential move to, say, the global south and Africa, you actually have an extension. There's an element of resilience being built in as well for spares, for looking at repowering and elements, and having still that model on the cards. Okay, it might need to come from a different jurisdiction, but at least it's there because it gives us options, and it's something I hadn't thought about before.
But and that's what's going to make it messy, because, for instance, in Nigeria at the moment, there is a massive market for second-hand. And I keep saying I'm about to say ICEs, internal combustion engine cars, and that, unless you stop that, that will find an economic home. That there will be buyers for that, because there's no policy to price it out. There's no policy to stop them from coming in, so it will be messy. So the chances are you'll have a bit of both. You'll probably have the e-buses, the fleets, the two-wheelers, the Hales. You'll have that layer of decarbonisation come up, but there'll be a layer that doesn't, because it's messy, and that messy will be cars. Where someone can afford to get a second-hand Range Rover or BMW or whatever without, because it's available, and it's maybe still a third of the price or half the price of a brand new EV, even if it's a BYD. And BYD is the biggest seller of cars in Ethiopia as well.
Is it?
Yes, and I'm considering that as my next car. So there you go. That's
interesting. I didn't realise it was so the intricacies around it and how linked it is to infrastructure and the behaviours of folk. And I mean, that messiness is I think we need to deep dive into that maybe with down the line in further podcasts.
I'd
and maybe
love to
bring
find some
in.
real experts in these topics.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we'll be doing, is that we've been doing some research on some
Yeah.
on some guests that we can bring in and we can learn.
Yeah, I mean,
in
this
more
is
of detail, because this is just some cursory
this
reading
is
on
new
my
for
part.
me. This is very much outside my comfort zone and knowledge, but it's really interesting just to hear how it's being. You know, I do think we need to start looking out width of Europe in particular on policy and regulatory framework. There is other things to look at, other ways of doing it, and we're not the experts in everything. And I think especially with new generations coming up behind us, the behaviours are a lot different, and we need to start incorporating that in. You know, how many scooters are on the streets these days? Okay, they're bloody fast. We need to slow them down a little bit. I have to say I've had my run in. But, you know, the use of bikes, you know, making it more accessible, making it a little bit more, you know, 2 little feet. A lot of people, I barely use my car in Glasgow. Purely, it's, you know, it's there as a convenience. It's there for me to have a comfort blanket on, to be able to take off at the weekend or do my shopping or whatever it may be. But I actually haven't changed up that car in an awful long time. She's the best girl ever. Love her. Not moving. But I will be moving to an EV probably, or a hybrid of some sort, depending on circumstances. But it's a case of when. I'm very slow to move at the minute. And it's not because I just don't want to, you know, the car is good.
Well,
I don't want to.
I've got a colleague who says the best.
Use it minimal.
The best, the lowest emission car is his old car, because he doesn't need to buy a new car that gets shipped from anywhere.
Exactly.
And, you know,
I'm with them on that. That's exactly. Yeah. I have not, but I'd be quite happy. I have a lovely A3. It does the job. It's immaculate
I'm more
inside
in the sticks, so I've got to.
Well, I'm from the sticks, so you know it's. I need a car. If I move back to Ireland in the morning, I would be in the car every single day. But I can walk out my door. This morning I came by bus, straight to the train station, train over, do likewise on the way back. But I don't need it, and equally I'm happy to walk as well. But it's a case of how do we change those behaviours? Because I know people who would just turn their nose up at you got the bus into town, and I was like, you know, coming from a country background, that would be alien to them. So changing those behaviours from an early stage is quite interesting, and seeing how Africa has done it.
Well, the thing is that I don't have the figure, but over the next 30 years, there's a massive transfer of population to urban centres in Africa, and that's going to be a big aspect of it, because that's going to support that bottom-up decarbonisation, which is that kind of urban transportation. You know, those 2-wheelers, the 3-wheelers, the buses, the shuttles, the e-buses, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in essence, and just to wrap this one up, it's messy. Leapfrogging is messy. You're really kind of in a web of policy and regulatory framework. You're looking at the behaviours, the social and economic backgrounds, I suppose, of some of these countries. But I think, you know, there are surprises. Looking at Nigeria, looking at Ethiopia in particular, I'm really intrigued to hear a little bit more. But, you know, you've got that tension, I suppose, which is natural to have. It's probably a little bit more enhanced in probably the global south a little bit more, or it's completely, as you say, leapfrogging ahead and completely breaking the rules for that ladder itself. So will we draw to a close, John, and thank all our listeners and viewers. And I suppose we're in the Christmas edition. We've got, you know, some well-earned.
Are we?
We
I
are.
didn't know we were in the Christmas edition.
Yeah, I mean, John, you love a Christmas. I know you love a Christmas, but it's a case of wishing everyone the best. It's been a really fruitful year, but it's equally been tough. So have you got any advice for your listeners to do over Christmas? Chill out? Anything to listen to maybe on the metal side?
Oh, yeah, okay.
Put you on the spot there now.
Yeah, on the spot. Yeah, so listen to some metal, and if you want to listen to some metal, you've got this year, Killswitch Engage album, absolutely awesome. Putrid's new album that was a couple of months old. Yeah. Really excellent. Hailstorm. Absolutely brilliant. And so with Bloodywood as well. Get some Indian heavy metal, folk and heavy metal.
And have you asked Santa for some tickets to a festival?
I've got albums. Don't laugh. I'm redoing my vinyl collection of Phil Collins solo albums. Santa's bringing me Phil Collins.
Phil Collins.
Yeah, I love Phil Collins.
Where did that come from? Look, we'll leave it there on that note. And Phil Collins, definitely surprised me, John. And we'd like to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas and, you know, take time out, relax, chill. John, any further advice?
Have a fantastic new year.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
remember that 2026 does not, you know, the industry is in really good shape. It's slightly more conservative, but that's maturing. We're
Yeah,
maturing
absolutely.
as an industry.
And we'll
So
be back in the new year with part 2 of this series, which will be looking at LATAM. So really looking forward to that.
and Scottish renewables
Oh, yes.
at the end of the month
yeah.
in January. So
Yeah.
hopefully see everyone there.
Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. I'm Una Brosnan of the Revolting podcast.
John MacAskill, and keep the rotors
Turbines.
turning and the heads banging. And we'll see you again after the holiday period. Thanks again, Una, and thanks again.
Thanks
team.
again. Cheers. Thanks, guys.
Is that all right?
Well
Is
done.
that right?
Another one in the bag.
I was all over the place.
I
on
was
my
a bit all
topic.
over it. I was kind of going, where are we on the discussion?